So hello everyone and welcome to SCG Near Surface Geophysics Technical Section Student Subcommittee webinar on how to develop an excellent technical presentation, which is part of our webinar series on critical skills. The SCG Near Surface Subcommittee and myself, Chinaze Mary Arukwe, will serve as your hosts for today's webinar. Before we begin, the model for this webinar would be a short presentation followed by an extended question and answer section. During the Q&A section, if you'd like to ask questions, please raise your hand in the webinar interface, and SCG will adjust your settings to allow you to ask your questions directly to the presenter. Alternatively, please place your questions in the Q&A box found in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen when you move your cursor over the bottom of the screen. Today's presenters are Dr. Vivian Ogwadima and Dr. Brandon Duggan. Dr. Vivian Ogwadima is a geoscientist. She has an undergraduate degree in geology and a master's degree in petroleum geology from the Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Nigeria. She has an industrial PhD with Total Energies Research Center and the University of Lille in France. She has to her credit several awards, among which are the IBA Imperial Burial Award, African Regional Winner 2013, NAPE Award for the Best Undergraduate Thesis 2014, NAPE CGG Veritas Award for the Best MSc Thesis in Geological Research 2017, several national and international scholarship and grant awards. She is the pioneer president of the SCG NAIU chapter and has served as a student official in various associations, including SCG, EAGE, NAPE, AAPG, NMGS, SPE, and IAS. As a geoscience researcher, Vivian is a reviewer for a couple of journals. She has published several peer-reviewed journal papers and has over 9 conference paper presentations at the GSA, SCG, NAPE, RST, and AAPG conferences. Her current research is focused on mapping and studying the Pleistocene to recent subsurface geology of submarine canyons. She is passionate about the application of artificial intelligence and data science in the advancements of geoscience. She loves to play chess and travel. Dr. Brandon Duggan, professor and associate department head, geophysics, Colorado School of Mines, is a geoscientist who couples theory, experiments, and models to understand the interactions of fluids and solids in Earth's shallow crust. Brandon's research group uses this approach to study natural resources, natural hazards, and carbon storage. Brandon regularly participates in geophysical, geological, and field programs, 12 total field projects, 4 as a co-chief scientist. His research and teaching contributions have led Brandon to receiving the 2018 Asahiko Taira International Scientific Ocean Drilling Research Prize, jointly awarded by the American Geophysical Union and the Japan Geoscience Union, and a Blue Key Honor Society Tau Beta Pi Outstanding Faculty Award in 2017. As an Earth Science community member, Brandon is a member of the Environmental Protection and Safety Panel of the International Ocean Discovery Program and is an associate editor for AGU's Journal of Geophysical Research, Solid Earth. So I'd like to turn over the mic to Dr. Vivian, our first presenter. Dr. Vivian, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Arukwe Mary, for that wonderful introduction. Can everybody hear me, please? Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes. Yes, certainly.
Okay, I'm delighted to be here with you guys once again. And today I and Dr. Professor Brandon is going to be sharing with you guys some very important skills to have an effective technical presentation, whether for your theses or seminars, and most importantly in conference presentations as well. I would like to know how many minutes I have to present my PPT.
As many as you need.
Okay.
All right, then. I'm going to share my screen now. Today, we're going to be talking on how to create an excellent technical presentation. If you were here the last time we had a webinar like this, we talked about how to draft an excellent abstract and extended abstract for conferences and for several other activities. If you were in that webinar, you will know that what we are here to present to you today is an elaborate version of what we showed you guys the last time. It's like we are here to broaden what we were able to minimize and have it done in just a couple of words, maximum of 400 or 450 words. During our abstract section, we talked about how to summarize all our research, maybe a research for about 5 years, 3 years, 6 months. It doesn't matter how long that research has been conducted. We need to look for a way to present all our findings, our methods, our thoughts, everything we've done, the methodology, into an abstract that is not more than 350 words. And we are able to achieve that. If you are not in that webinar, it's not a problem. You probably know how to do that, or you could go to the SCG site. We have that published there. Laurie, that's correct, right? They can find that presentation at the SCG site. Yes, so that you will be able to transition properly from what we did there to here, because we are not here to talk about the basics of abstract, but to talk about how to organize your presentations, where to put what and where not to put what to say, what not to say, and how to showcase what you've done with your body language, with your speech, and with your results and your findings. I'm going to talk first of all about how to structure the technical presentations on a PPT, and Dr. Brandon is probably going to do some practical aspects of them with some examples. The first thing to do when you want to organize or draft your PowerPoint presentation for conferences is your title page. Your title page must be very concise and brief and very broad. Like, it has to be very clear and bold enough. It shouldn't be tiny. Your title page must contain the title of your presentation. The authors have to be there. And then you must include the affiliations. Which institute or university are you affiliated to? You have to include it there. Now, I'm going to take a pause to make a few sentences here. On your title page, it's very important most of the time for you to just give a 1-minute brief overview of what you've done. For example, after introducing yourself, my name is Vivian. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my study on, you say the title of your presentation, and then you could just go ahead and tell them this study was sponsored by ExxonMobil or Chevron, if there is any, and then we've decided to do this research because this, because that, because we have this opportunity and we collaborated with this and that. In just 1 minute, make a brief summary so that people will know where you're coming from and they will have a clue of the type of resources you have moving forward. It's just a brief overview, 1 minute, but this is not a must. But I greatly suggest you do that because it's going to put things into context. After having your title page, you must have your presentation outline. Your presentation outline must state sequentially the subject that you intend to cover during the course of your presentation. But of course, you have to start from the beginning. You can't start from the middle and then move backward and then come forward. You really have to be organized when you're presenting. You have to go through your introduction, your methodology, your interpretations, results and interpretation, if you have time, discussion, and then your conclusion. Now, this slide is just a draft that you need to make reference to when preparing your own presentations. I'm not saying you should categorically take what I have on this slide the way it is and put it on your PowerPoint presentation. It's just a draft. Make reference to it. You can have much more bullet points that I have here. Maybe in your interpretation, you can have a sub-bullet point of seismic interpretation, sequence stratigraphy, grain size analysis, geomorphology. You can have such things. But I warn you, don't leave your slide crowded with too many words. No. It's not good at all. Few bullet points are what you need on your slide. And as a geologist or a geoscientist, we deal more with figures, photos, images. So your slide should contain more of tables, graphic, charts, images, rather than lots of text. Again, don't read out of your slide. Don't go putting lots of things on your slide and one you write, two you write. No, just few bullet points, your titles, and then you take a look at your audience and explain what you want to explain from your slide. So your presentation outline must contain the subject matter you intend to showcase during the course of your presentation as you move forward. Now, the introduction I highlighted there must cover this. They must. As a matter of fact, you must state your background of study. If you don't have, it's not like you can put it in wordings. It could just be a map of North Sea, map of Niger Delta, map of Nova Scotian Basin. And then you just show a broad overview map with the location of where you're studying or where your study is being carried out. It must not be in worded form. Show the images, then explain what is there. Highlight or pinpoint within the maps what you want to show and what it is. You say it. Don't put too much writing again on your slides. You can just put a brief review, maybe 1 or 2 bullet points of authors that have worked in your study area before. You can just put 1 bullet point, Okoro et al. 2012. Leave it there. 2nd bullet point, Rubolu et al. 2011. And then when you showcase that slide, you tell them that several work have actually been done in this area, but specific to my subject matter are the works of Okoro et al. And Rubolu et al. Who worked on this and that. Then you gradually migrate and transition into the problem statement. Although they worked on this and that, they did not cover this, and no author has till date done this. That is a problem statement. But you have to be very smart. And like I said earlier, don't go talking too much. It's true that you've done this research for so many years, or maybe minimum of 6 months, and you have a lot of things to share. You have a lot of results, lots of data to show people the beautiful things that you've done with the resources that you've been given. You have to know how to go straight to the point. Show them the most important thing. Don't go talking about everything, because most of these presentations, maximum 45 minutes. And you only see this in PhD thesis defense most of the time. In conferences, they could tell you have only 15 minutes. I mean, when they tell you have only 15 minutes to showcase your work, research that you've done for years, how do you intend to tell all the stories within 15 minutes? That is the skills we want to show you here. Understand the key facts. Talk about them, move to the next. Don't talk too much. I'm going to stop here again to reiterate and make it very clear that oral presentation, whatever presentation it is, whether in your workplace, your webinar, your conference, you have to practice. It's not by magic. That you're good at something, it's because you did it over and over and over again. Nobody is too intelligent as to just to stand within audiences and then give an excellent PPT presentation without practice. You have to practice Get your slide ready on time. Practice over and over again to make sure that your speech are coherent, that your speech are transitioned in order from one slide to the other. Make sure that you're hitting the nail on the head. Say exactly what you want to say, leave it at that, and move to the next slide. Your introduction has to cover this, but it does not mean that all these points has to be on one single slide. No. Your background of study can be on one slide. Your review can be on the other slide. Your review might not even be just a bullet point of the authors. It could be an image or a figure from the work of that author. So you show them what this author has done, the result of his work. It can just be an image. It might not necessarily be just a bullet point with his name. An image, and then you just cite him and say what his work is all about. Your problem statement can be on one slide if you have more than one. If you don't, you can merge two of these subjects on one slide. But don't put everything like this. Like I told you, this is just a presentation for you to make reference to when preparing your PPT. I'm not saying take everything we are presenting here today, verbatim, like copy and paste. On your slide 1, you can have your background of study with the figure of where you're studying. Your second slide can have the review and the results of previous work. Your slide 3 can be talking about your problem statement and your objective of study with respect to the problem you intend to tackle. Your final slide within the introductory section can be the importance of your study. Why do you want to conduct this study? What do you look to achieve? What will be the significance of this problem you intend to solve with your objective using whatever method you intend to? You should have your methodology section. After your introduction, you have your methodology section. On this slide, you need to present them with the available data sets with which you carried out your analysis with. Did you have water sample? Was it seismic data? If it was seismic data, is it 2D or 3D lines? What method did you use? Seismic interpretation methodology or geomorphology analysis, sequence stratigraphy, or chronostratigraphy. You need to highlight in bullet points, just bullet points. On this slide, nobody is expecting you to even spend up to more than 30 seconds on the methodology slide. Why? This is because when you get to your interpretation section, showcasing your results, you have the opportunity to highlight the type of methods you used to obtain your result. So coming here to spend so much time on your methodology slide is not a good idea. Please, I will advise, if you have pen and paper, jot down some things, because I just realized I'm giving more points while talking than what I have on the PowerPoint slide. If you're given 15 minutes to present your oral presentation, make sure that you don't have more than 15 slides. Dedicate 1 minute to each slide. 1 minute to each slide. If you must have if you must have slides more than 15 minutes, more than the allotted time, make sure you practice such that you can present 2 slides within 1 minute or 3 slides within a space of 1 minute. This is why I said you must practice. And it's not always good for you to go above the slotted amount of time for your presentation. It doesn't really tell good about you. It shows that you're really lagging in one aspect of your presentation skill, regardless of whether you delivered a perfect oral or poster presentation or not. There are some things you must do when you're rendering your technical presentations. Very, very important. You must have a perfect flow of. Let me use this simple example that everybody is going to understand. You have a pasta and you want to prepare pasta for your family to eat. And then somebody asks you, there is no pasta at home. What do you do assuming you want to have pasta for dinner with your family? You can't tell them, oh, I'm going to prepare the pasta. And then I go to the market to buy pasta. Then when I come back home, I serve it to my family to eat. This is a very disorganized way of presenting your idea. You have to go systematically. There should be a perfect transition. First, what do you intend to eat for dinner or serve your family? You tell them, oh, pasta, I will have to go to the market, get the pasta, come home, prepare it, cook it, get it ready, then serve my family to eat. You see how it moves. You have to go to the market first, get it, cook it, serve it. You don't start from the middle. You serve it, then you go to the market, and then you cook it. No. In technical presentations, you have to tell them, we have this data. You have to tell them the problem. We have this problem. And then we have this data because we believe that with this data, we can solve this problem. For us to start solving this problem, we decided that the first thing to do was to conduct this analysis. You see, now you are beginning to move gradually. There must be a perfect flow of ideas. Don't be disorganized. You need to be systematic. You need to be consciously intentional in your dealings while preparing your technical presentations, because most of the people you talk to are industry professionals, they are professors, and most importantly, they are young people, young geoscientists, young people who are coming to learn. And if you're not organized, how do the young ones get to learn from you? And how do you intend to impress and convince the experts about the work you've done? So we really need to be careful when we are dealing with showcasing our ideas. It's a very important skill and it's going to win you a lot of things moving forward in your career if you master how to do it. There should be perfect flow of methods. Methods, yeah, of course. Let me use this example again. You want to prepare your pasta. You cannot put your pasta, you put your pot on your electric stove, and then you put your dry pasta into it, add all your ingredients, and then allow it to boil for like 30 minutes before you add water. Does that even make sense? No, it doesn't. I'm using a layman example so that we can be able to understand this, right? So you need to show your methodology. It has to flow perfectly. If you want to conduct seismic interpretation, it's only logical that you map your faults first before you map your horizons. Why do you do this? So that you can make up for break in seismic reflections. If you map your faultings, then it will be easy for you to be able to correlate your seismic reflection going from the down-thrown block to the up-thrown block. You can't just go mapping your seismic horizon first before doing the fault mapping. It's just like a reverse methodology, which will not work. Number one, it's not only going to waste your time. Secondly, if you're not a smart person or an expert in that field, you will end up generating wrong results, which could be very disastrous if you're working under a boss. Thirdly, there should be seamless transition. Like, it should be so easy. It should be easy for people to follow you. People should be, they should feel happy listening to you because they understand how you transition from one subject matter to the other. And they can see the relationship between one idea to the other. They can see how they merge. This is why I said that there should be a short recap, a short summary at the end of every subject matter. I'm going to talk more about that moving forward. In your result and interpretation section, this is very key. I mean, this is key. We are talking about research here. Of course, if you're going to make some presentation in conferences or convince a lot of people, maybe proposal for grant acquisition, or for maybe you want to go for your PhD and then you need to present your proposal because you need some high quality PhD supervisors to accept you into their research team. You need to be able to showcase your work in a very sweet form. When you're dealing with your result and interpretation, you must show your observations first before diving into interpretations. Observations first before your interpretations. For example, if you generate a map, let's just say a prospect map, and then you run an attribute analysis on a map, you can't just show a slide with your maybe amplitude map, and then you tell them from this slide, we noticed that there is hydrocarbon accumulation on the upper right side of the map. Like, I don't understand. Who understands that? You just show a map and then you just tell them from this map, there is hydrocarbon on the upper right hand side. What makes it hydrocarbon prone? On what basis, right? So you have to show them this map first, or show them the table or the graph or the chart. Tell them, from this map, we ran an attribute map. Like I said, during your interpretation and your result and interpretation, you have the chance to showcase or to tell them about the method you adopted. We decided to conduct attribute analysis because we figured it would help us understand the regions where we have hydrocarbon accumulations. For that reason, we adopted the RMS attribute method. We ran attributes on this map, and we observed that the lower portion of this map, and you have to point at it with your pointer. Always make sure you go with your own pointer, because most times the batteries are down, or maybe they don't have pointer. If you want to go for presentation, it doesn't cost much. Go with your own pointer, it can help, right? You point at it. We observe that at the lower left of this map, our amplitude reading are lower. It's really lower than what we have at the upper right, which makes us believe that there is a possibility of hydrocarbon accumulation at the upper right map. You show them, you observed something, you show them your observations, right? You can't just say, from this map, upper right is hydrocarbon. Why? And even when you tell them that you have regions of lower amplitude reading and higher amplitude reading, so how did you know? How did you just assume that the higher one depicts hydrocarbon? Yeah, okay. So in as much as you show your observations first before you make your interpretation, based on what? What is the principle? Based on what? The easiest way to do that is to reference an author who has used that method before, and it works and it's published. You could say, we are using this amplitude map to identify regions where we have hydrocarbon accumulation, because according to this person who researched on RMS amplitude, he made the observation and reasonable conclusion that areas within high hydrocarbon, high amplitude reflectance depict regions where we have hydrocarbon accumulation. This is part of discussion, right? But I tell you, This is the reason why I said you need to practice. If you don't practice, just imagine the amount of minutes it took me to talk about observation, interpretation, and discussion. It's like 4 to 5 minutes. But if you're making a presentation, you need to practice to make sure you deliver the observation, interpretation, and discussion within a space of 1 minute or even less, and do it clearly for people to understand what you're saying. It's very, very important. So you must practice. Each result, each slide you show your result on, you must highlight the observations you made there first before you dive into conclusion, because this is research. You can't be going back and forth. You need to be very intentional about it and very clear. You need to move from point A to point B, not from point B to point A. Secondly, you shouldn't be moving back and forth. Some people will show a slide of results, of a result, slide 10. And then they will like I said earlier in slide 8, then they go back to slide 8. After talking about slide 8, then they come back to slide 10, move to slide 11 and slide 12, and then say, like I highlighted previously in slide 10, then they go back to slide 10. That is a very bad habit. When you're presenting professionally, which is our intention for you guys today, you shouldn't do that. Again, this is why you must practice and make sure that you present your ideas clearly. They should transition and they should flow systematically, like the flow should be perfect. On no condition should you have any reason to go back to the slide that you've already presented. It doesn't tell good about you, eh? Okay, let's move forward. Now, this is an example I intend to show. Hydrocarbon prospect evaluation. If you want to deal with this type of topics or this type of topic, because I'm just mentioning one here, you have lots of data sets. You have well logs with log suits, gamma ray, whatever. Then you have seismic data. Let's just assume you only have well log, seismic data, and biostratigraphic data. For you to, and then you've conducted your analysis, and then you have it scattered everywhere. You've not organized it. Even when you've organized it in thesis format, your thesis could be maybe nothing less than 100 pages. How do you intend to, how do you intend to compress your 100-page information into 15 or 20 slides? So you must pick the most important point. It is true that maybe you conducted process analysis, data visualization, you did data wrangling, you did log analysis, sequence stratigraphy, chronostratigraphy, geomorphology. Well, of course, you did all those things, but we don't need to know that. The audience don't need to know that you did all this. And then those methods and data set should not, for any whatsoever sake, appear on your slide. Just take the most important one. Which of these methods, which of the data set and the method gave you your most confident results? Put it on your slide, and that's it. That should be what you present. Don't go telling the whole world that you did a bunch of course, we know you're not the first person. You want to show your results. You want to advertise your finding. You want to prove that you've made significant discovery. You want to add to knowledge. You want to give back to the world of geosciences through the research that you've just done. Well, then do it properly. Do it effectively. In no situation should you be going to present your results with any form of confidence or overconfidence or bragging. No, you should be as simple as possible. You're not going there to fight or to compete with anybody. Because one of the major reasons why most people make this mistake is because they are overconfident and they feel they've done this work. They are the master, they know everything. So yes, and then when they go there, they just lose themselves. And then they they talk verbosely, ambiguity everywhere, saying everything, both the relevant ones and irrelevant ones. This example of hydrocarbon prospect evaluation, you as a geoscientist have done this analysis. You have to sit down and think, what was the first thing I did with my data set? What was the first thing I did? Was it seismic interpretation? Was it well log? Which one had to come before the other? If the first analysis you carried out was well log analysis, state it, let it be your first result, interpret it, and then state the reason why you did it first. I mean, seismic interpretation, you have your seismic data. You cannot just go to your seismic data and start mapping horizons and say, this is the reservoir top and this is the reservoir base. No, you can't do that. Why? Because you don't know which is the reservoir top and which is the reservoir base. This is because you must first identify those reservoir tops and base from your well log analysis. This is the reason why your well log analysis should come first. And then after your well log analysis, through seismic to well tie, you post these well logs, the information, your interpretation of the well log on the seismic data. Only then will you be able to map the proper horizons from seismic. Why? Because you've been able to conduct well log analysis. So you are driving, it's like you're taking energy from well log analysis to continue moving or to continue your journey through the seismic interpretation studies. So the results you obtained from your well log analysis is what will give you the basis to continue with your seismic interpretation studies. So when presenting your results and interpretation, you have to present your well log analysis first before you go to your seismic interpretation. You should not show the results of your seismic interpretations before showing the results of your well log analysis. If you do that, then you will become like one of those people who present slide 10, go to slide 12, then come back to slide 10. No. If you do that, you tell them, we conducted some seismic interpretation where we mapped our fault horizon and generated our map. And then next slide, you see well log analysis. And then you say, actually, we did our well log analysis before we did our seismic interpretation. Then you go back. I don't know if you understand what I mean. You have to be intentionally conscious, and you really need to practice this over and over again. You can practice with your friends. You can practice over the mirror. You can practice by recording yourself on your phone, then listening to yourself talk, and then try to make some corrections and significant and meaningful adjustments so that you will come out bright when you're presenting your thesis. So this is exactly the same methodology you should use to present your ideas. Now your ideas are flowing. You conducted your well log analysis. Well log analysis, from the idea you got there, it has now transitioned into the basis for you to carry out your seismic interpretation. And I said there should be a short recap after each subject. So when you're done with showing the result and interpretation of your well log analysis, before you go into seismic interpretation, you can just say, well, the reason why we did our well log analysis is because we'll be able to move further into our studies. From our well log analysis, now we have identified our reservoir tops and base. So we are going to carry out our seismic interpretation using the results that we obtained from our well log analysis, because we are going to post our top and base on our seismic section. And then you show the slide. When they see the, oh, okay, from the well log analysis, she mapped the top and the base, and now we are seeing it on the seismic section. You see, you have carried them along. They know where you're coming from and they know where you are at. And you are possibly going to tell them where you're going to. Now, after conducting your seismic interpretation and generating your maps, you will tell them, now from our seismic interpretation, we have generated our time and depth map. But then since we are analyzing for prospect, hydrocarbon prospectivity, we need to run our seismic attribute analysis for us to understand where we have hydrocarbon accumulation. With that, we used some of the maps that we've generated from our seismic interpretation and extracted some attributes maps from them. Now they are understanding. You are using the map from seismic data, and then you're running seismic attribute analysis on them to extract some data. You see how this idea is flowing. It should be systematic. Your idea should flow from one to the other. Give a short recap before you go to the next subject and tell them how the subject you just ended is going to help you continue with the next idea or the next topic you intend to talk about. It's very, very important that you do this, because by the end of your presentation, your audience would not even know that you have finished your presentation. They would be looking to see more. Like, they won't be tired because it will be so engaging and captivating that they understood everything you said, and they will be looking forward to more. And by the time you said, this is the end, this is conclusion, and thank you, they'll be very impressed with you. What do you think? I think I'm right. Now, when you've shown your observations, your interpretations, your discussions, you have to dive deep, straight to your conclusion. Do you know why we are going to do this? The reason why I'm saying spend 1 minute on each slide, nothing more than 1 minute. Actually, it depends on the amount of time you're giving. The reason why I'm taking my time to explain this is because Laurie told me, Vivian, take as much time as you have. If not, I would have just, given maybe maximum of 2 minutes to each slide so that I finish on time. But because I need you guys to get this, because I need you to understand this, because it's very vital for you students moving forward, it's very, very important. And you don't just apply this alone during your conference presentation, you also apply this in your thesis defense. Your thesis defense, your webinar, your seminar, whatever presentation you want to give, if you follow this format, you are going to turn out very, very impressive. People are going to be impressed with you. Now, the reason why I said spend only 30 seconds, 1 minute on each slide is because you are time limited. You have time constraints. They will tell you have 40 minutes, you have 15 minutes, you have 20 minutes or whatsoever. So the trick is, pick the most important point, hit the nail on the head, strike it, let them hear it. If there are some minor points or minor method or minor ideas, if you know that it's going to consume your time and it's going to waste your time, leave them. I promise you, the judges or the audience are going to ask you questions about that. And when they do, it will be a perfect opportunity for you to give response to those questions, because you know the answers already. And nobody will tell you you have 5 minutes to answer or you have 1 minute to answer. Nobody will tell you that. So give them the most important point. Leave the rest for the questions, because they're definitely going to ask you questions. Use that opportunity to elaborate. Instead of you putting everything on your slide, give them some questions to ask you, but make sure you convey the most important points you intend, the most important things you need to show them. Don't waste time on doing that, right? Okay, in technical presentations, you don't have abstracts. No, you just go, just this method. You don't need to put a slide with abstract. No. And when you conclude, you just highlight your key points, your findings, your key findings. And then you try to tell them the problems that has been solved. I think it's part of your key findings. And then you can just, with one bullet point or two, the importance of your findings and how it's going to be impactful in science, the benefit of your finding, the impact it's going to have in science moving forward. How important is it? And then if you have the time, or you're the type that is really research oriented or research inclined, or you want to move forward, or you have a lot of questions, you're the type that is very inquisitive, you want to do a lot of things. From your studies, you must have realized that there are some things some questions you didn't tackle, some problems you noticed when you were conducting your research, but because it is beyond the scope of your research, you decided not to waste your time diving into them. You decided to do exactly what your objective and your aim is and conclude in record time. So in your way forward, you can highlight some of the problems that have not been solved and recommend them for future research as topics. You can recommend further studies based on these problems that have not been solved. And if you encountered some problems, or maybe you have some objective you wanted to have tackled but couldn't tackle it because of lack of data. Maybe you want to conduct a regional sequence stratigraphic analysis, but all you have is just one well, seismic, and then no biostratigraphic of core information. It is really going to be very difficult for you to say that your sequence stratigraphic calibration or framework which you've created is 100% correct without such information. So if you have such scenario where you intend to get some results, but because of data constraints, you don't have enough data for you to achieve that, then you can recommend that such data be acquired so that that analysis can be carried out for a more detailed understanding of what it is within the studied area. And you can recommend some methods also, some methodology that can be applied to solve the problem that you just realized or observed. Since it's beyond your scope, you just did not do it, but you're recommending that they do it so that somebody else who is coming to continue from where you stopped your research can have something to work with. Or maybe if you're the type that wants to keep researching, you could be called back to continue solving the problem you just identified. Be confident when presenting. Be bold. Don't frown. Try to give a little smile and then look at your audience. Don't glue your eyes to your slide and then read out of it as if you're a zombie without brains. No, please, we are scholars. If you're here listening to this webinar, you are a scholar. You're intellectually sound. You're here because you want to get better. So take it from me. It's going to be very interactive and interesting when you look at your audience to explain what you have on your slide. It will be like you're talking to them and they're understanding you. But when you glue your eyes to your slide when talking, they're going to be bored. Some of them will stand up and start walking away. It's your work. Be confident. Don't be scared. Tell them what you've done. If they have any questions, they can ask you. If you don't have answer to it, take their advisement, take their suggestion into advisement, and then consider it moving forward. Listen to suggestions and critics. Don't be too confident, like I know it all. Of course, it is your work, but be open to criticism. Be open to suggestions. You might have done this, but maybe somebody is ahead of you and has a better way of doing it. When suggestions are made, take them, jot them down, and then try to consider them when you go back. Can this be applied in my work or not? Or should I just ignore it? Of course, research is not just done by one person most of the time in these days. It's done within a broad team, and then one person gets to present. Take those suggestions back, discuss with your teams, and see if you can apply it to make your work better. I really hope that this has been really helpful. But before I go, I want to show you another methodology of presenting your work in conferences or during technical presentations. Instead of using the broad title, introduction, interpretation, geomorphology, you can just use a single heading that transitions from one idea to the other moving forward. If you show a particular slide, it will tell whether you're still in the introduction part or not. If you show the next slide, it will transition into the methodology. Your next slide, maybe you're talking about chronostratigraphy now. So people at each point, when people look at your slide, they will know what you've covered and what is yet to be covered. For example, can you see this slide? I'm sorry, a map is supposed to show here, but it is not showing. Now we are in the Niger Delta overview. If you move to the next slide, we are within methodology. You can see, just with very tiny title, but then you just transition over time, chronostratigraphy, geomorphology, and then you keep moving sequentially. If you don't want to use the first method where we have the presentation outline, if you must use this method, you should not use the presentation outline. There is no need for you to have a presentation outline. All you need to have is your title page. And this should not showcase on your title page. It should not appear on your title page. The next section where you have your introduction, you can show your background as a very tiny subtitle up here in blue color. Maybe background of study, you show your map. The next one, still on the introduction, you have your problem statement. Within the introduction on the next slide, again, you have your objective. Then when you dive to the methodology section, it keeps moving until you get to your conclusion and then your way forward. And that will be it. So I think you should know which works best for you. If you want to use the first format or the second format, whichever one you think would be better for you. I think your audience will definitely understand what you're talking about. But I think the benefit of using this one right now is because at any point in time, people will not be lost as to which topic you're in or you're talking about. If your figures change or you keep moving from one slide to the other, they don't need to start reading the bullet point or within the figure. The moment they just look up, they know, oh, she's still within the sequence stratigraphic interpretation. Even though you've been talking for a long time, oh, she's still within the chronostratigraphy. I'm more interested in what she's going to say when she gets to the sequence stratigraphic session. So with this, people will just take a look at it and see a broader overview of what your presentation is going to be like. And then they see you moving from one point to the other until the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vivian.
Let's go for, oops, wrong button. All right, so today I want to talk about giving your technical presentation. So Vivian gave us this great intent. Let's set our intent for every presentation. We need to go in a logical, functional, and important avenue moving forward. And I'm going to talk about sort of more on the delivery side of things, how we integrate with our audience, which Vivian pointed out, we need to think about that as we're preparing our slides. One thing that we'll build on a little bit is working with text and images. I liked, I think maybe a short summary of how Vivian mentioned this was be intentional with everything. Sometimes less is more. How do things work together? Practice, practice, practice. Dealing with questions, and then I want to wrap up with one slide on you as the presenter. All right, so the first one is your audience, and many of us have probably seen this or heard this before, but every time I give a talk, I sit down and think really about who is my audience. Am I talking to a group of school children who don't know anything about the geosciences? How do I engage them? What are they going to expect from my presentation? Am I working in a classroom full of college students who are advancing their knowledge beyond just learning geosciences, but they want to become the next geothermal energy leader in the world? Or am I working with a bunch of specialists? Like here today, we're here with the near surface geophysics group. We have some common knowledges. So I think it's important when thinking about your audiences is not just who they are. Are they young children, or are they adults, or are they in between? But also thinking about what is their knowledge base. This is going to affect the vocabulary you use, maybe some of the images you use. to engage and enlighten them. And related to that, setting your intentions. If I'm talking to this group in the upper left corner of young school children, I might want to emphasize to them the importance that water has in our life and how we can use near surface geophysics, which is fancy words, but I might just say, how do we use science to understand where our water resources come from and how we can use them sustainably and in a good way? Whereas if I'm talking to a group of specialists down here, I might use words like electrical resistivity tomography to understand aquifers and aquatards. I'm talking about the same thing, but the vocabulary I use will be the intent, will allow me to do the intentions that I want. And then last but not least, deliver for your audience. Vivian talked about lengths of talks, 15 minutes, 45 minutes. I think sometimes with young children, you might only have 7 or 8 minutes. What can you deliver in 7 or 8 minutes? What is your intention? And how do you build off what people know? So some things that help me when I do this is not only knowing my audience, but also knowing how audiences respond. So on this slide here, we have our audience attention on the y-axis with low intention at the bottom, high attention at the top. And here we have time, the beginning of the presentation over here on the left, and as we move farther and farther along in the presentation on the right. And we want to know the audience behaviors and patterns, and this is a general trend. The audience attention span is usually really high at the beginning of the presentation. And I really like one thing that Vivian emphasized on your title slide. Everybody said, oh, wonderful, today we have Dr. Vivian presenting, and she's going to be talking to us about, stratigraphy in the Niger Delta and its importance for hydrocarbon plays. And then she comes up and gives me the one sentence, this is the most important thing that you're going to learn from my presentation today. The audience is excited. You were just introduced. They're listening. Tell them exactly one thing that you want them to know. You know everybody's listening. Then we start talking, or at least I start talking, and if I don't do anything else, the audience engagement will decrease through time. We're humans, we see a bright light, we hear a sound, we look around, things like that. And the audience, their interactions will decrease unless you're active, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then at the end, you'll say something like, in conclusion, or to wrap up, and the audience will perk back up. So you have this other opportunity to really nail them again with those 2 or 3 things. And again, I really loved how Vivian put that. You can only teach people 1 or 2 or 3 things in 30 or 45 minutes. So just stick to that. You may have done 200 things in your research and it's all amazing. Today, you're gonna get through 3 of them. So this is a general way that the audience behaves, but we can alter this. So here overlaying on this other, on the plot we had before, is how to engage the audience intentionally. And Vivian's last sort of slide of showing different topics on the top of the slide really emphasizes this. You can bring them in. Today I'm going to talk to you about sequence stratigraphy in the Niger Delta, and it's important for hydrocarbons. And then you talk about some details. And then you can use some intentional and transitional words. Now I'm going to talk about the exciting data that we use that were provided to us by Shell Oil and Gas or something like that. And you're re-engaging the audience. I'm going to show you something new. Come in, use your voice, use your hands, bring them back in. And then you peek them and then they drop off a little bit. And then you might say, okay, now that we've looked at the data, let's talk about how I use those amplitude maps to interpret where the hydrocarbons are and how that helped me rethink about this entire stratigraphic trap system or something like that. And then it comes back and you can keep your audience at a much higher level of engagement with intentional words. And so I just think it's always important to think about how do you do that? How do you build that through your presentation? What keywords are you going to use? What inflection points are you going to ask the audience a question? Things like that. And so engage them intentionally to keep them. And this also helps even in an audience like today. We've got 100+ people in here. We have very different knowledge backgrounds. We're all geophysicists, but some might be more on electrical methods, some might be on seismic methods, some might be on machine learning. So everybody's attention span is going to be a little different, and think about how to engage that entire audience as you move through your presentation. All right. Next couple of things that I wanted to talk about are text and images. And again, these are all guidelines, just like Vivian said. You don't have to take this word for word, and I'll come to that at the end a little bit. But some key things that I think everyone should think about when when using text and images is consistency and continuity. Humans like patterns. If we use, in this case, Vivian used a wonderful bulleting and color template. I continued that bulleting template here in my presentation because then the audience knows how to predict what's coming next. They know how things are happening. So consistency and continuity is really important. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Intention for every word and every figure that's used. Don't put a figure on the slide if you're not going to talk about it. I know everybody loves pretty pictures of penguins when we talk about Antarctica, but if you're not talking about penguins, show something cool that you're looking at, maybe sub-ice geophysics or something like that that you're really going to talk about. And make sure that every word is intentionally used, whether it's a spoken word or a written word, and that those written words and spoken words work with your figures to tell this amazing story that you've been working on for so long. And last that I'd like to point out today on text and images are scales and legends. We're geoscientists. We need to know if something's a meter long, a kilometer long, if we're looking at drilling a 100-meter well or a 10-kilometer well. Those are very different things. And scales and legends are important, and pointing them out to your audience. I'm just going to give a couple of examples, again, just for people to think about how these are in play. So the first one is looking at consistency and continuity. So these are summary points from a presentation that I've given before, and they're both saying the same information. The first one, marine isotope stage 12, the ice sheet extended about 120 kilometers offshore. We think this had a really big value and importance on the pressure in the subsurface and the amount of fresh water that was stored. The glacial loading from this ice sheet generated about 2 megapascals of overpressure, which is a consideration that must be evaluated when drilling this freshwater resource. But the most important thing that came out of this is the role of these glaciers in place 100 cubic kilometers of fresh water in this basin. And so in this case, all of the bullet points are what I would say consistent and continuous in terms of they follow the same structure, they're using absolute numbers, and they build on each other. I would say that's a pretty good job of doing it. Or I could say the same things, but in a very different way. So the offshore ice sheet extended very far. This generated 1 to 2 megapascals of overpressure, and the freshwater volume in place from this was 100 cubic kilometers. All the same information, but how it's ordered and organized helps us think about how the audience receives it and ultimately retains it or uses it. So consistent, be quantitative where possible, and be consistent in your formatting. So I started with nouns on the top. Here I started with nouns and numbers, and so I kind of mixed it up. The top would probably be a better example. I'm a big fan of editing. I make rough drafts, and then I edit. And then I make another rough draft, and then I edit. So a lot of these things can be fixed after developing your presentation. Adding on to this, intention for every word or figure. Many of us have probably been in a presentation before where there's just a big image on the screen, like this one right here. So imagine that instead of giving this overview talk today, you're just seeing everything below this black line. And so there's an image of some data somewhere in the world. But if you're not paying total attention to the presentation, maybe you got a message, maybe your friend asked a question about the previous slide or something like that, and then you look up, you don't know what the intention for this slide is, and it's too little information. So I think you want to avoid just showing a figure. We can go on the other side and give too much information on the slide. So here we've got I've used the same image down here, but I've now put a header on the slide. So satellite data, this is the 2004 Sumatra tsunami. So somebody looks up quickly, they know what I'm showing, or at least in the general sense of it. Then I've got this big long block of text. Satellite data allows us to use high resolution sea surface imagery so we can evaluate tsunami velocity and run up, and so we can test models. I'm guaranteeing there's 100 people in this audience right now, 87 of them stopped listening to me after 4 words there because they can read the sentence. You're all intelligent people. You don't need me to read the sentence to you. So it's always thinking about this hybrid approach. I've got my favorite image here. When I talk about an image, I usually start from the outside and work in. So we're looking at a map of the Indian Ocean region here. We've got longitude and latitude on the X and Y axis, and this is sea level altimetry data from satellites. These data allow us to do velocity analysis, to think about how fast that tsunami in 2004 moved across the Indian Ocean. It allows us to do tsunami run-up analysis, thinking about what areas are most vulnerable to high run-up and at high risk then for damage after an event. And it also provides us with high resolution data to calibrate our models to improve our efficiency for predicting in the future. So we want the words that we write, the figures that we have, and the words that we say to work together so we can pull the audience in. But if they're not paying too much attention, because it will happen sometimes, they can look up very quickly and see, oh, this is the part of the talk I'm really interested in, or, oh no, I want to go to the chronostratigraphy part like Vivian mentioned in her previous one. I'm more excited than that. I know it's coming next, but it helps you work together with the audience in all of these different venues. So the next one that I want to do on scale, text and images are, again, scales and legends. This is one thing where I'm adamant. Here's a seismic line, a process seismic line on the top, and an geologic interpretation of that. It's got some problems on this image. It's not a perfect image, I admit that. But does anybody know where in the world this image is from? Does anybody know what polarity the data are? Does anybody know how I went from a seismic section to an interpretation? It's not really there, and we don't even know how deep we're looking. Is this 100 meters? Is it 4 kilometers? Is it 8 kilometers? We can't really determine that, and so I think when we're working with images and scales, we always want to make sure that we point them up. So here I've now increased this. So first I start out with a base map. Where in the world are we looking? So here I could point out the regional site on a base map. We're going to look at this red seismic line going from northwest to southeast. So here we're going from northwest to southeast on the seismic line. We're going from sea level at 0 down to 800 meters below sea level here. I can talk about the seismic, and then I can transition into the interpretation. But I want to wrap my audience around everything that I'm talking, so they can learn as much as humanly possible, not just see some really cool geophysical figures, which we all love, but what we want to be able to do is we want to take those images and that knowledge behind those images and apply them to our own information. So let's give the audience everything that they can to learn. Practice. I probably could have made a 2-hour presentation on practice, but this was introduced quite well at the beginning, so I'm going to try to do it here in about a minute or so. Something that came up in the questions and written earlier is, what about images, font sizes and color blindness or things like that? And I always say, whenever possible, display your presentation in the same way the audience will see it. So if you're going to be giving it in a lecture room, if you can go in that room beforehand and put your PowerPoint up and look at it and see, oh my gosh, those fonts are too small, or oh, these colors don't work, you're at least prepped for what the audience is going to see. If you're doing it in a hybrid fashion, which many of us are doing these days, how does it look on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams? And it may look different on Zoom than it does when it's projected to a full audience. And so I will adjust slides depending on whether they're going to be looking at it on their 13-inch laptop monitor or an 8-foot wide monitor in a classroom. And so I always think it's best, if you can, to display when you're practicing as your audience will see your presentation. I loved recording yourself. Thank you for bringing that up, Vivian. It's such a good thing to do on a presentation. I always think it's important to practice your presentation, say it aloud, use your voice, hear what it's going to sound like to the audience. This will also affect your timing, which is the next one. You need to know, after 6 minutes, I need to be at this slide. After 9 minutes, I need to be at this slide to keep you on pace moving forward. And I know from my own experience, if I practice without saying it out loud, I can't get the timing right because I think the words much more quickly than I say them. Oftentimes when I'm giving a presentation out loud, I will intentionally slow down to make sure that the audience can keep up. Maybe they're new to the content, or maybe I want to emphasize things. And so there's no substitute for practicing something out loud and thinking about where your timing is. Where do I want to be at this time? Where do I want to be at that time? And the other point I want to emphasize on timing is know when your presentation should end. I think the presentation is going to end at 4:50 p.m. so I can get home and play football with my children. I don't want to be there till 5:15 listening to the talk. I love science, but I love my kids too. And if I want to be, they're going to be done at 4:50, they should be done. Some other things that I do are the last 2 points that I like to point out. think it's important to memorize the key point of each slide. Like if someone just flashed it to you right in front of you and said, tell me one sentence about this slide, what do you want the audience to take home? I think it's really important to know that. These compressed presentations where you're in 15 minutes or 12 minutes or something like that, that's all you get. And so you need to know exactly what you want to say. And then something that I do a lot is I review my presentation without my slides. Maybe I'm going for a walk, I'm just thinking about it in my head, what comes next? What comes next? How can I keep the audience engaged? How do I transition from my data to my results? What do I want the audience to know about what we saw in the raw data and then what we interpreted from the results? How do I do that? It helps me think about things where I may need to give them a little more support, or depending on the audience, or I might be able to skip some things depending on the audience. And so it helps me become efficient with it and be comfortable with the information that I'm presenting. Last couple of slides that I have here. Questions are a really important part of our presentation. It goes back to timing. Let's leave our audience some time to ask us some questions. Let's dive deeper. We learn from other people. And I often think about during a talk, what questions do I expect to get? I know I can only cover so much. I've done 200 things. I'm only talking about 10 of them today. Which ones am I pretty sure somebody's going to ask me a question about? Can I give them a little bit of a hint during the talk to help them? So maybe that works. If not, I'm ready to answer it. I might have a backup slide because I'm like, somebody is definitely going to ask me about this attribute and how it's calculated. I will tell them when they ask, but I'm not going to use it in my 14 minutes. So what questions do you expect? Prepare for them. I will say my one catch that is don't plant a question. Don't have somebody ask a specific question. Just be ready for questions that you anticipate. And then also, I think thinking about how you will answer your questions. You've practiced your presentation over and over and over again. You've done a wonderful job. You're ready to do this. But somebody asks you a question. Maybe it's something you haven't thought about before, or maybe it has. Well, what should you do to answer the questions? First thing, repeat the question. This makes sure that you and the question asker are on the same page. Did I understand the question correctly? Sometimes I didn't, so maybe we can have some corrections there. It also lets me think for a minute or two. I've practiced my presentation, but I haven't practiced my answer. So if I have a repeat the question, I can think about how I'd answer the question. Oftentimes we're thinking on our feet, so I would provide, where possible, ideas or insights, but be careful that this is the discussion. You don't want to shut anybody down or something like that. This is, and it's the dialogue that brings us to more science richness. So don't be absolute about things. Provide a discussion and ask to follow up with people. Yes, that was a great question. Here are my initial thoughts. I'd love to follow up with you. Maybe we can go into a Zoom room and talk about it later. And the two things I want to emphasize here. If somebody asks you a question, answer their question. Don't answer a different question. Sometimes people like to do that because they feel comfortable. And if somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer to that question, rather than answering a question you do know the answer to, say, I don't know. It's research. We're creating new things. We're learning new things. I don't know a lot of things. I'll tell people, I don't know. Here's how I might think about it. Let's go talk about it more. That's a great question. Be honest, be sincere, be yourself, which brings me to you. You are the leader here. You have been invited to give this presentation because people, your colleagues, your peers, employers, see the skill set and the amazing things that you're doing. Every person has to be themselves. Vivian has her own presentation style. I have my own presentation style. You have to grow into your own presentation style, and that will be genuine, and that will help you be successful. Why are you all here today? I think this next bullet point emphasizes that. Be prepared. Think about my presentation. Draft some slides, try something, go back, edit them, fix them, change them. I'm giving the talk on submarine landslides and channel development to an elementary school this week, but to a bunch of PhD researchers next week. How am I going to be prepared for those two different talks on the same topic? And it takes time and effort. Yes, I can put 15 slides together in 5 minutes and give a very mediocre or bad talk. I can put 15 slides together in 15 minutes, and I can practice them for a couple of days and understand them and give a wonderful, confident presentation because I put in the work. I put in the research. I thought about every word every image that's on that slide, I can walk out there and be confident and know that I was invited because I am a leader in this field or this topic. And I think if you do all those things, it leads to success and enjoyment in your science and in your presentation and the advancement of everybody's science, because people see how it can be done well, and then they want to succeed just like you did. So those were just some thoughts that I had. If I had to emphasize anything, just make time to practice, and practice with friends, practice with yourself. And I think you will succeed and enjoy your science. That's all I have on my presentations, and I'm happy to answer more questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Brandon and Dr. Vivian. That was a very insightful presentation.
Is it okay to refute arguments made by the audience that conflict with their own findings? And how strong should the rebuttal be in the event of disagreement?
I'll give a shot at this one if Vivian wants to add her thoughts afterwards. So this is a really good question, Victor, because sometimes we do get contrary or aggressive questions. I always think of this as we should be science forward. You know, here is the information that I have. These are the conclusions that I've drawn. I have seen, if you have seen the work of those other people, somebody has a contrary point, I have read that work. Here's what I understand about it. Here's where the differences are. But I think rather than being too strong of a disagreement, try to understand what the observations and results are of both of them, not the interpretations. So are we looking at the same observations? Are we looking at the same results? And then talk about how maybe the interpretations could be different. But I think rather than going too strong in a rebuttal, say, this seems like something that we could have a great conversation about and really dive into the detail. When you've only got a minute or two to answer a question, being aggressive or condescending or highly disagreeable is not a welcoming way to help advance science. It's probably going to shut off a discussion or escalate a discussion rather than advance science. I don't know, Vivian, if you have more to add on that.
Yeah, I'm going to come from a different angle, and you're perfectly correct. When somebody rebutes or gets disagreed with what your findings are, you don't just be very strong with your response. No, the moment you get too difficult with your response, these guys are professionals. If they were seeing you as somebody that have actually done something good, some of them might begin to doubt, like, no, I don't think he's that good. If he doesn't even want to be calm enough to be open-minded that there are some other possibilities, he's not that good. So your integrity and reputation will just drop, like it's really going to drop. And if you've scored like 90% point before, I bet you might see yourself going down to 45 or even 50. So when somebody rebutes your finding or disagrees with what you've done, one way to respond to that is, and this is why I and Dr. Brandon said, make sure you know what you're showing on your slide. You've observed it, you know what it is, and you've seen it. One way to prove to them that they shouldn't disagree with you is by convincing them that what you said is actually true. Show them evidences, show them your proof. But if they said somebody else has done it before and it's different from yours, just like what Dr. Duggan said again, try to understand if the study was conducted from the same region, where the same data sets used, was the same methodology applied. If they are not the same, then obviously there is bound to be some changes in your results and finding. But like he said, you need to be open-minded. Try to convince them with what you've done. If they still don't agree, then just be open. This was why I said, don't be too confident, don't be arrogant, be open to suggestions. Take it. Sometimes you might even know that they are not so right, but you're there to show what you're doing. Don't argue. If you try to tell them they don't want to see reasons with you, and you're so sure that you're right, thank you for your suggestion. I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to consider it. Thank you very much. That solves it. Yeah, that's it for me.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. We have another question and a couple hands up, so we'll do the question first and then go to the raised hands. Or a statement, there is a different way to present between oral abstracts and PhD thesis, question mark. Who your audience is, right? That's what this goes to and what your intent is, right?
Yeah, I think I mean, if I understand, I think it does go to who your audience is and your intent. I think it also goes to, when I think of an oral abstract, I think of a written abstract or an abstract or a PhD thesis. And I often think about the difference of my audience and how much time they have. If they're sitting down to read my paper,
Exactly.
they have time to think about it and they can go
Yes.
back, they can email me questions. In the presentation, I have 12 minutes or 15 minutes or 40
Yeah.
minutes, 5 minutes of
Yeah.
questions. And so there is definitely an approach that involves, what is my intent and what are my goals? So I think that was a great way to restate it, Lori. There was a question, did somebody answer it about references?
No, I saw that as well. Yeah.
So
There
we had a
are-
question, references, putting references in the presentation. I think we should always give appropriate credit and references to people. My personal opinion is I don't show a references slide when I give a talk. I have it in case somebody asks me, could I get that reference from the Jones and Smith 1996 paper? I have it available for them if they ask for it, but I don't show it because I know I've only got limited time. I say who did it, but I don't show the full references. That's my personal approach.
Yeah, I think I agree with Doug because references, how much can you really show? And you don't expect them to just stay on one slide and start reading Rubolu et al., Jamno et al., like it doesn't make sense. But I think though, it's really important for you to cite all figures that are not from you. You must cite the authors, but it's not a must that you reference them. And if you're good enough, from the citations, you can actually identify the paper. If you want to search for it online, you can actually get those paper. But if you can't, you can contact the presenter directly to send you that stuff. But no, you don't need to include references. Something just came to my mind, just for 30 seconds. Let me say it. Please, if you're still here, there is an importance for backup slides in your presentations, because like I said, you cannot showcase everything. And most of the time there are some minor things you want to say, but because of time constraint, you just decide to put the major ones. After you say your conclusion and thank you, you should have a backup slide. Lots of them, it can be 20, 150, doesn't matter. Include some backup slides so that when they ask you some questions, instead of you saying you don't have the slide here, you can just go directly to your backup slide and show them and show them what you've done. So it's going to avoid a lot of doubts about your work. So try to have a few backup slides after your thank you for listening. Yeah. It's important.
Thank you. We'll go to one of the two people that have their hands up. Oh my gosh. Corey, we'll go with you first. I'm going to allow you to talk. So if you'd like to ask your question, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, good evening. Okay, thank you, the both facilitators. I mean, this section were amazing. So I have a question. On the way forward slide, or the section for the way forward, imagine in a situation you have you encountered a problem during your research. Is it possible, or is it a good habit for you to maybe ask the panel or maybe somebody that asks you a question around that area for maybe how to go about your problem? Is it a good habit?
You, if I understand correctly, you mean, is it a good idea for you to ask your judge or the panelists for a solution to your problem during your presentation and question session? Did I get it right?
Yes.
No, you can't do that. But you can do it after your presentation and the section that the section for the conference is over, you can stay behind, wait for whomever you want to ask that question, the right person you think has that expertise. But you can't just start asking questions. It's not your place to ask questions. It's your place to give your presentation, listen to suggestions. But you can actually be smart enough. If they ask you a question, what do you think about the monsoon African climate? And then you tell them, well, I actually dealt with sea level changes during my study, but we never talked about the monsoon African climate. So I'm sorry, I have no clue about what that is. But if you don't mind, could you tell me what it's all about? Because I would like to know. You can do it that way. Then they can say, oh, no, I just want to learn from you. Or they can say, oh, wow, it's not that bad.
I can't
You can search the paper of this and that, and you will see it. There is a paper online by this person at all. You say, thank you, that's all. But not when you're giving your presentation and they're asking you questions, and then you just decide that this is the right time because I encountered a problem, let me ask them. No, you can't do that. I'm sorry. You just have to wait after your presentation, you're done, and every other person is done. Then you can approach them individually for suggestions on how to solve your issues. I don't know if you have anything contrary to what I've said, Dr. Brendan.
No, I think that's wonderful. I think, you know, in oral presentations, when we're time limited, you want to emphasize the things that you've done. You've been successful.
Yeah.
You tried hundreds of things, but you're only talking about 10 of them today. The one recommendation I give myself and my students when I work with them is for early stages of research where I'm still having lots of questions or growing. I often volunteer to give a poster at a conference where we can have a longer dialogue with people. And that's where you can talk about, where am I going next? How am I going to do this next things? Where are my stumbling blocks? And so in that venue, if you go to the poster session, you know you have maybe 5 or 7 or 20 minutes to talk to one person, not 12 minutes for your presentation. So if you have lots of questions, you want to have long discussions, volunteer to give a poster. I think that's where you're going to get the most robust feedback on moving forward. When you give a talk,
Excellent.
That's excellent, great job. But in early stages, I think posters are really rewarding to get feedback that will help you move forward.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Antonio, who has his hand up as well. Antonio, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Hello, buenas tardes, buenos días. Just wanted to ask a question regarding how political are you allowed to be when you rebuke and when possibility arises that the person is from, like an antagonizing person towards you. So how political are you allowed to be if that case came to happen? Because I've seen it happen a few times, so I just wanted to ask that from the professionals. Thank you. That's my question.
Laurie, if you can help, because I didn't get him properly.
It was not very clear, but he asked, I think, hopefully I'll get this right. How political can you be I guess, asking questions to the presenters or vice versa? If you're presenting and people are from, sounded like a geographical area of some strife. And I would say, based on me, and then I'll pass it over to the presenters, although I shouldn't probably interrupt, but we're talking science, right? We don't want to be political at all, really. We just want to talk about the research that we've done, our findings, and then get feedback on it without involving any other outside influences, right? So that would be my thing if I got your question correct, and then I'll turn it over to Vivian and Brandon.
I agree completely. I think we are scientists first and foremost, and if someone were to antagonize me or do something inappropriate because of something cultural on my end or their end, I would say, I appreciate your comment, but today we're here to talk about the science of the Gulf of Mexico. And let's focus on that for now, and just, be courteous and focus it back to why we're here. And we're here to talk about science. I agree completely, Lori. That's what I would do. If it becomes more aggressive, if you continue to do it, that's where you could ask a convener to step in or something like that and take over.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sure.
Good
Sure,
point.
that's it.
All right, the next question. What if I'm asked by one of the audience members to go back to a previous slide? Shouldn't I go back? And I guess this is during the question and answer part.
If you're done presenting, even while you're presenting, the judges have the right to ask you to, could you go back to the previous slide, please? They have every right to do that because they are the ones asking you to, not you. They want to follow, they want to follow your ideas. They want to flow with you. Maybe they got disconnected and they want to understand why you're on the slide where you are, because probably they didn't get your flow, how you transition from one idea to the other. Or maybe a call came in and they stepped out, but they are really interested in your work and they want to understand what you've done. During the presentation, if they do that, if they ask you to do that, kindly just do it and continue moving. But if it's after the presentation, anybody can ask you to go to any slide, go to the title page. Could you go to slide 20? That is question and answer. So if they ask you to go, please just go. It's your presentation and you have to keep them as entertained and you have to keep it interesting until you finish, until they release you and say, thank you, Mr. or thank you, Miss. Nice job. You can go now, please. If they ask you to go back, go back. It's very, very important. I think that is just it for me.
Yeah, I agree completely. Great job, Vivian.
So my question is as a near surface geophysicist, so we mostly work with very integrated problems like groundwater, archaeological, then shallow surface investigation. So many times our audience or audience is geologist, hydrologist or geochemist. So very mixed kind of audience. And as a geophysicist, as a specialized geophysicist, you cannot have expertise of all the fields. So how to engage this kind of audience, or if some rebuttal happens and some expert hydrologist or senior hydrologist start asking questions from his field or start connecting things from his perspective. So recently, this one rebuttal happened with me. So I am kind of in an argumental phase. So that's why I wanted to ask how to manage with this kind of mixed audiences.
Yeah, it's very clear, Utsav, and I think I would say it's a really important question, and sometimes it's not even just different disciplines. I study one of the things I study are submarine landslides, so landslides in ocean basins. I think about it 8 hours a day. Most of my audience thinks about it once a month or something like that, and so it's always putting the context into your audience. But I think when you're dealing with outside audiences, it's really trying to think about those extra words that you can provide to them to help them understand. So you might be talking about a near surface hydrology problem. Let's say you're talking about contaminants and you're using electrical resistivity. You want to give a little bit of an introduction about that method. Why does this method work? Why did I choose this method? Because as I change what's dissolved in the water, it changes how the current goes through. So I can very easily separate, I've got air in the pores or I have water in the pores. Really breaking it down to simple concepts so they can see how your expertise in near surface geophysics relates to their expertise in hydrology. And oftentimes that means you're not going to cover as much in your talk. So if you give a groundwater talk at SEG, near surface geophysics, you can launch right into the geophysics and dive into the algorithms that you're using and how you improve the processing speed or something like that. But if you now go to the National Groundwater Association, you're giving a talk, you might not cover as much of the technical detail because you're trying to focus on the impacts for the result. So you might actually change your script a little bit, and the images that you show based on that audience I think the last part of your question is what happens when they start asking deep questions about their field. That's where it's okay to say, you know, I'm still learning about hydrology. That's an excellent question. I'm going to go back and think about that, but I'd love to have a dialogue with you about how we might be able to use IP to look at hyporheic zone exchange or something like that. But I think it's one of those cases where when you're speaking to new audiences, put a little bit of time into giving them the foundation that they need. You might cover a little bit less content, but you give them a little bit more foundation, and spend a little bit of time thinking about the vocabulary that they use. I talk to a lot of oil and gas people. I talk to a lot of water people. When I talk to oil and gas people, I talk about reservoirs and seals. When I talk to water people, I talk about aquifers and aquatards. They're changing geologically, but I just
Okay, that's an excellent response, Dr. Brandon. But I actually noticed something from the person who asked this question. You are a little bit uneasy. To you, you feel like you should know everything. And you feel like people around you expect you to have responses to all the questions they have because you're an expert in your field. Please don't feel obligated. Nobody can know it all. You're an expert in your field, like Doctor has said. Tell them, this is it, this is that. Give them the basic and the fundamental knowledge of what you do because you do it well. Explain it to them, but tell them you're a novice in their field and you would like to know more. If they have the time to share or to throw more light or teach you a little bit about what they do. Don't feel bad that you can't answer their questions. No. No, you know what you do, and that is what you do. Stick to it. If you're a reservoir geologist, you are not a sedimentologist. If you're a sedimentologist, you're not a geophysicist. So if a geophysicist is coming to you as a sedimentologist to talk about seismic processing and reflection and seismic inversion, and you don't understand it, tell them, oh boy, I'm sorry, but I'm only here to characterize these rocks, and I'm going to field tomorrow to see if we can get some cores and samples for the grain size analysis on the lab. About seismic, I'm sorry, I don't know much about that. Could you meet my colleague, or if you don't mind to share more light, you can teach me. I don't mind learning. Be confident. That's all, please.
Yeah. How are you? I just want to ask how important using hands and your body in your present, and what will you do if someone asks you about previous slide? What are the situation that you handled?
I'll talk about hands and body motion. I'm a hand talker. Everybody can probably see it. Saw. I think this goes to being yourself. Everybody has their own mannerisms. I have tamed them down over time. I have a policy. My pockets are empty right now. Anytime I give a talk, I empty my pockets, so I don't have change to play around with or keys to play around with. But I use it. I think it engages the audience. It sort of shows my own enthusiasm. Some people won't use their hands as much, but I think what you want to do is you want to convey an open and welcoming demeanor, whether that's hand motions or just calm and comfortable. But I'm going to move my camera a little bit so people can see it. You don't probably want to give your talk up like this because people are not they're not going to want to engage with you. So, and every person's going to have to find their own comfort level. I know there's a second part of the question, but I'm just going to go. There's a question in the chat about offer advice about minimizing tendencies to stutter during presentations. There are lots of nervous tendencies, whether it be stuttering, whether it be playing with your keys, whether people say they're all different. All people have different ones. Some people have few of them, some people have more of them. I think the best way to work around those is what Vivian started, is practice. Be comfortable, be confident, know what know you're the leader, know what your boundaries are, and go out there and be yourself. And if you stutter once or twice, that's okay. Everybody does. It's not a big deal. Just keep moving on. If I say too many times, don't get mad at myself in the talk. Just say I can do better next time, and keep keep practicing. I remember, 20 years ago seeing these amazing professors get up in front of me, and I thought they were superhumans, the way that they could do all this stuff. And what I realized is they were just great people who practiced a lot.
Yeah, tell you.
So that's what I have on those questions. Abdul, I think the other one you talked about going back in slides, but I'll let Vivian. She already gave a great answer to that, or if she has other add-ons.
Yeah, but what the questions about going back on slide, I didn't get it clearly. If you could reiterate, what was that again? The question about going back. Can you tell me what it is?
All right. If you can, Abdul, you can unmute yourself.
Abdullah, what's your last question?
What's the last part of your question, Abdullah? All right, well, I guess we're not going to get it.
Okay, since it's not there, let me just make 1 or 2 sentences to add to what Dr. Brandon has said. Yeah, about body movement and use of your hand. Please, you can move, but don't cover your slide. Don't cover your slide with your body, because you want to gesticulate with your body and your hands. And don't stand at one place either. Don't just stick yourself to one place and with your hands in your pocket. You can just move by some inches, just change your legs, move back, move forward a little, just step left, step right, step forward, step backwards. That's all. And don't over fling your hands, just little gesticulation. And like he said, please, it's only by practicing can you get that good. If you don't practice, you won't be that good. That you're intelligent is because you read your books. That you made good grades was because you studied and you studied and you keep studying and you studied well. If you don't practice, I'm sorry, you can't do it, but that is the only way you can conquer it. It's not in the gene. Some people have it as talent, but they still have to harness it, hone it to get really better at it. Anybody can be a good presenter.
All right, so we have one question left in the Q&A box, and no more hands are raised. So the question in the Q&A box, should I show a separate slide for discussion, or I show result figure and discussion alongside? So the question, separate slide for discussion and results, or combine them in one?
You want me to go first, Vivian?
Well, if you want me to go first, I don't mind.
Go ahead, because I have an answer, but if I had an extra 30 seconds, it might be better. So go ahead.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. If you're talking about results and interpretations, and then you want to have a different slide for discussion, honestly, I personally wouldn't advise that, because it's going to take a whole lot of your time. And most of the time, if you want to show a slide with discussion, it will warrant that you repeat the figure or the image you have in your previous slide on your slide of discussion for you to even have a discussion. And repetition is not advised when presenting. You can have that in your manuscript. You can actually have that in your article, or maybe in your thesis where you want to compare your results with other authors. If you see some of these published papers, the discussion part of it really don't have so much images like the results part of it. So please, I will advise you show a figure, right? Label it properly, your results. Try to observe, interpret, make whatever discussion you want to do on that figure right there within a stipulated time. Talk about your observation, talk about what you've interpreted it to be, and then discuss it. According to Jack et al., according to Prater et al., who identified slope-graded and above-graded slopes, he actually understood and categorized this slope to be graded slope. And from our studies and these observations we've made here, this is exactly synonymous to what he did. You just made a discussion. You just discussed on one simple slide with a single image, with your observations. Please keep it at that. It's going to help you a great deal. And after the presentation, somebody wants to ask more questions about that, well, then you can go to your backup slide and elaborate, or maybe give them the full article, address where they can get the full article to the author you just discussed about in your work, for them to read, you know. But please, I will advise you don't have different slide for results, interpretation, and then discussion. No, I wouldn't advise that. I'm sorry, that's my take. I don't know if Dr. Brandon has something different to add to it.
I generally agree with it. I love what you said of being very clear in your wording. These are the results, these are the interpretations, the discussion. So if you're going to do it on one slide, be very clear about what the result is. And I view a result as something that we would all say the same thing. So if we asked, you know, what color is my shirt today? We would all say red or pink or something like that. That's a result. That's an observation. We shouldn't be refuting it. The interpretation and discussion bring your prior knowledge and other things, and they could be interpreted differently from other people. So you want to be very clear about what the differences between them are. And I would say, you know, 99 times out of 100 do exactly what Vivian said. Sometimes we do get to give a 45-minute talk in a workshop or something like that, and you might spend a lot more time where you can break them apart. It's the rare occurrence. But I'll go back to practice. If you're practicing something and you've got it and you feel like, man, this just seems like it's too much on one side, try to do it in two slides and practice again and see how it works. And then go back and I make slides, and then I make a different slide, and sometimes it becomes two and sometimes it becomes one, but I try them out to see what's going to work best. And it takes a little bit more time up front, but it leads to a much more exciting presentation experience for me and hopefully for my audience as well.
Okay, so with what he just said, I think it's safe to say it's dependent on the time allotted to your presentation and your practice to see if whatever you want to present falls within the time frame. So that's a brilliant one.
It does depend, but I would say most times it's going to be exactly what Vivian said. You're going to put one image up there, and rather than talking about it for 1 minute, if you're going to do the results, the interpretation and discussion, you might have that slide up for 2 or 3 minutes to talk about all those things.
Thank you so much. It has really been a wonderful time of learning. So I want to thank Dr. Vivian and Dr. Brandon, and thank you all for attending the SCG Near Surface Geophysics Technical Section Student Subcommittee Critical Skills Series webinar on how to develop an excellent technical presentation. So please respond to the webinar follow-up email. Let us know what you liked, what could be done better, and suggestions for future webinar topics. Also, look out for our social media posts to register for future webinars. Again, I'd like to thank you for attending today, and thank you, Dr. Vivian, Dr. Brandon, and Laurie, of course. Thank you so much, and do enjoy the rest of your day or evening, wherever you're joining in from.